Today we have a very unique high-end laptop from Dell's XPS series gaming line. The XPS 17 L702X is special because a few rare options were made available to Dell's XPS series that previously were only available to Dell's Alienware product line. The most important of these is a $400 upgrade to the NVIDIA 3D Vision 120Hz screen, 3D infrared emitter, and the included NVIDIA Vision 3D active shutter glasses. They even had to increase the power supply up to 150 watts for the 3D versions to make it all happen. When coupled with the Blu-ray drive, you now have a professional 3D home theater system ready to play Blu-ray 3D movies right out of the box, and even 3D video games. We'll get back to what that means later, but let's cover the rest of the stats on this laptop first. Under the hood, we've got an Intel Core i7-2630QM quad-core processor, 16 gigs of RAM. Yes, you heard that right, 16 gigs of RAM for the very serious PC user. The hard drive space is enormous on this machine, with 1.5 terabytes of space to hold all the 3D media and games. It actually holds two standard size laptop hard drives with two separate 750 gig drives installed. A dedicated gaming quality video card, the NVIDIA 550M, that has its own 1 gig of video RAM on board. Not only is the screen NVIDIA 3D Vision and 120 Hz as I mentioned before, it's also 17 inches and 1920 by 1080 full HD. It's huge. You'll forget you're on a laptop. Huge. The optical disk drive I mentioned earlier can read and write both CDs and DVDs, but it can only read Blu-ray disc. So it's not a Blu-ray burner as I'd hoped when I first read the description myself. Dell included a JBL Audio 3-speaker surround system that has a very large sub that gives it surprising bass. It also has two headphone jacks that's nice for sharing a 3D movie on an airplane. It has an HDMI port to display your laptop on a large TV or projector, but please note that 3D will not be supported unless the TV is 120 Hz or higher. More on this part later. It also has 3 USB slots, 2 of them are USB 3.0 and the other is a USB 2.0. Other ports include an eSATA port, 1/4 inch analog microphone input, 9-in-1 card reader for your photos, and a Dell style mini display port. It has a web camera, a full 100-key keyboard with number pad, and the usual touchpad that you might expect. It has a normal wired RJ45 internet port, but there's also a Bluetooth and wireless in internet on the removable LAN card internally. It also has a currently empty slot internally for a mini PCI Express card. These can be used for things like TV tuners, cellular Wi-Fi, also known as WWAN, or even SSD hard drives. Again, on this laptop, that spot is currently empty, so don't expect an SSD, cellular Wi-Fi, or a TV tuner unless you want to do that upgrade on your own later. And it includes one pair of 3D glasses with the laptop. That's quite a powerhouse of hardware, so before we get into all the details of how 3D works, let's look at the negative aspects of this laptop in fairness. We only found 3 things worth complaining about. 1. The laptop is seriously heavy at 8 pounds. It's like carrying a baby. And it will be your baby, and you'll love it anyway, even if it's a little bit on the heavy side. 2. The battery only lasted an hour and a half during our full volume movie test, so if you're playing games or watching movies without a power source, don't count on this for very long without plugging it in. We tested a few batteries here and did some reading on it, and it turns out this is related to all the crazy features involved in the 120 Hz monitor, and the power load is kinda heavy as a result. Lastly, while the dedicated NVIDIA 550M 1 GHz video card is awesome, it's also soldered onto the motherboard. That means there's no aftermarket upgrade on that video card later on. Moving on, let's get into the fun part finally and talk about 3D now. First, we need to mention that 3D can be turned on and off as needed. Even in games and movies that support 3D, it can be toggled in the Windows display property. There are several different types of 3D, from the old red and blue glasses our parents and grandparents grew up with to polarized and shutter technology in modern systems. This laptop uses active shutter technology using NVIDIA 3D Vision and can play side-by-side movies, 3D Blu-rays, and 3D games and movies. To show you 3D in a YouTube video is complicated because you're not wearing the special glasses on your own eyes. But one way I can show you this on a video is using NVIDIA's configuration screen for the glasses. On this setup screen, NVIDIA is verifying the glasses are working by asking the user if they see a different image when closing their right eye and then their left eye. This is active shutter technology. Each of your eyes is seeing a different image. Usually when we're looking at a game or movie using the video camera, the different images in each lens is harder to notice. But on this configuration screen, we are looking at entirely unique images, so the difference is obvious. Where without the glasses at all, what we see looks like a slightly blurry image. So we start here to show you that you're getting an entirely different image for each eye. How do they do that? A shutter, or active shutter technology, just means means that we're blocking a lens for a brief moment. Like with a camera, the clicking sound that we hear when we take a photo is the shutter. So with these active shutter 3D glasses, we are actually looking through a lens that is blinking very fast, and at the same time they are alternating between left and right. In fact, the 120 Hz screen is flashing half the images to each eye at the same time so quickly that our brains are tricked into seeing in perspective. This is also why Dell needed to upgrade the screen for the 3D version, and also why we can't plug the HDMI cable into a normal TV and expect 3D output to work. Only some plasma and 3D ready TVs can support the high hertz requirements of active shutter technology. Active shutter also requires an emitter to keep the glasses in sync with the screen. It basically keeps the drumbeat for everything else to play along together. To summarize the technical aspects of NVIDIA's 3D vision, it's quickly showing each eye an entirely different image at the same time to achieve depth perception. 3D movies are created with two cameras mounted close together just like our own eyes. The two cameras allow the director to show the distance perception on an entirely new level. So let's take a moment and stop being technical and look at this from the perspective of the artist. The game designer or movie maker now has a new tool to use to bring more feeling into the scene. Objects are closer to us than before, or much further away than they could have shown without 3D in the past. Things like raindrops or an insect in the foreground seem to move out of the screen, where mountains or lightning in the distant background by contrast seem even further away. A documentary with a blooming flower comes to life, and a splash of water at the camera might make us jump. In art, things like perspective, vanishing points, and depth using foregrounds and backgrounds now have a much deeper role with 3D because it pulls the viewer into the scene. I can feel the vastness of an empty canyon, and I can almost touch the honeybee flying past. In video games, this new tool can be used in several different ways depending on the type of game and how the designer utilizes this new depth or space, if you will. Let's start with car driving games because everyone can relate to that. Driving games are especially improved with depth perception for the same reason it helps us on the road driving a real car down the highway. With 3D, I can tell much easier if I'm about to crash into a light pole or if I'm just noticing a strange object in the background as I fly around a corner. Now, the light pole is clearly closer to me and clearly a separate object from the background. Other types of games, like first-person shooters, vary depending on the game. For example, playing a game online against real people, I suspect I was the only person on the server playing with 3D glasses, but it did not seem to improve on my average statistics without 3D. Meanwhile, first-person shooters based on single-player storylines such as the Batman games, Tomb Raider, or Skyrim were amazing in 3D because it makes objects stand out. Area effects are much more realistic. In these games, the use of 3D was much more like a movie would be. Role-playing games, strategy games, and city builders seem to make very good use of the extra space or perspective because many of these games display both stats and item descriptions at the same time we are playing the game. The game makers have used this space to show off special effects in 3D while keeping the text and stats in different levels of depth to separate what is really part of the 3D world versus the stats and details behind the scenes. Overall, I was surprised to see how much more has been going on in some of these games that I'd ever seen before. I personally went back and replayed several of the Batman games and Tomb Raider just to experience it all again with a new perspective. However, with that said, I do have a few complaints worth mentioning about my experience. 4 complaints to be exact. The biggest complaint is that not all games support 3D. Many titles that you would expect to support 3D don't. Meanwhile, other games that don't even mention that they do support 3D actually do, such as the new Battlefield 1, for example. So if you're interested in a specific game, make sure you do your homework first. The second most important issue is that each game seems to have a slightly different level of depth, and it needs to be adjusted for each game. To do this, it requires the user to Alt-Tab back into Windows and open the NVIDIA display properties and then adjust the depth. I did learn later there is a hotkey combination to do this in the game using Control F3 and Control F4. The same 3D Vision hotkeys were also a bit annoying because it pops up a message every time a 3D game was started explaining that it was active and instructing me to press Control-Alt-Insert to make the message go away. This happens every time a game is started. And 4, in some cases 3D complicated things and the screen didn't look right until we made adjustments. There were at least 2 games where we had to disable shadows in order for the 3D to work correctly. Both of these were easy to fix after a Google search led us to other gamers discussing how to fix the issue. Another game we had to disable name tags over the users because they were especially distracting in 3D mode. A few of the games were a bit hard to enable 3D support because the hertz settings was separate in the in-game menus, and at first we did not think it supported 3D. And only thanks to persistence and digging did we notice the hertz setting at the bottom of an advanced video adjustments menu in the game settings. Finally, let's talk about the rest of the software. It comes with a fully activated Windows 10 with Cortana, the new voice-activated personal assistant, and Microsoft Office. We've tested several other applications for photo and video editing, and it performed excellent, but we would expect nothing less for an i7 quad-core with 16 gigs of RAM and a gaming class video card. Overall, my review of the the Dell XPS 17 L702X 3D laptop was a very educational experience. I was surprised to see they were able to fit all of this hardware into this machine in the first place. The design of this laptop is very nice when it comes to repairs and upgrades. It has tons of potential for future modifications, and it was produced in large volumes, so the parts are widely available, which you can't say about the Alienware laptops it compares to. The most unique feature by far, though, is the 3D screen. Glasses and infrared emitter making this laptop especially rare. You don't see a portable 3D system every day. Anyway, that is all, and thank you for watching.